What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Save for More. I am Luke Goodish, as always, and today we have 15 lessons on manhood from Teddy Roosevelt. So, last night I watched a documentary called A Cowboy's Ride to the White House. This was about our 26th president, Teddy Roosevelt. Now, Teddy Roosevelt is, unquestionably one of the coolest presidents in American history, especially when it comes to like just manly badassery. Like he's the man. You can actually catch this documentary on YouTube completely free right now. And I would definitely suggest doing that. I watched it last night, took notes, and I've got 15 unbelievably um, powerful lessons on manhood that I want to share with you guys. And it was an interesting take. It was an interesting view on Teddy Roosevelt because this story is a coming of age story. And this documentary actually hit me a lot harder because it wasn't about, the mentor, the leader, the president, Teddy Roosevelt. It was a coming of age tale of a young man forging himself into who he needed to become before he could be the president. And since you and I are in this process of becoming more, I thought this was a perfect thing to share with all of you watching. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Guys, lesson one came pretty early on, where they were talking about Theodore Roosevelt as a field scientist. They were very clear to make the distinction. He was not a lab scientist looking at things under a microscope in the safety of a lab. No, no, no. He was out there in the field, learning off the land. There's a philosophy in that that's worth noting and worth considering in our own lives. In this day and age, when we watch the YouTube videos and we read the self-help books, and even when we're going to counseling and things like that, and maybe we find mentorship or we go to a mastermind, like these things are all the laboratory. They're all you in the safety of four walls thinking. They're not the real world experiences of being out in the field. You're not learning from the natural way. Being the field scientist, that's more trial and error. And with that error comes failure and pain. But something to keep in mind as a part of this generation is that although it's easier and more convenient to be the lab scientist, if you're just staying inside, um, turning ideas over in your head and getting all this head knowledge and writing all kinds of things down in your notebook, and you're never actually getting out in the field, in the real world, then one, what's the point? Nothing's real, nothing sticks. And the other part of it is when you are forging yourself as a field scientist, when you're out there and we learn from the trial and error and the defeats and the failures, and we taste the real dust in our mouth, that stuff, it's more real. The theory and head knowledge will not get you through the devastation that this world will bring like the real world experience will. Does that make sense? That was the first lesson that stuck out to me. We need to be the field scientists, guys. We need to get out of our comfort zones, get out of this digital space, this metaverse, go experience the real world, become a man. Love this next one. He says, "Speak soft, but carry a big stick." Now, the other day I was sharing my favorite channels, my favorite YouTube channels, and one of them was Warrior Poet Society. And if you haven't checked out Adam Lovell from Warrior Poet Society, you need to. That channel is incredible. But this quote, man, it hits the ethos of the warrior poets. To speak soft is to be someone who is on the side of love and unity and peace. But you have to carry the big stick because unfortunately, that's not the real world. That's not the world we live in. We live in a fallen world, with a lot of danger. I don't have to tell you that. So to me, this speaks to that sheepdog mentality. And I believe in this sheepdog mentality that those of you who are capable should forge yourselves into being the sheepdogs. Be the protector of those who cannot protect themselves. Guys, this next lesson is awesome. It's a bulletproof mindset. It shows you kind of the headspace of this individual. No wonder he was able to conquer so much of his inner life and his outer life to the point that he became the president of the United States. This guy accomplished so much and he was never expected to do a thing. If you know anything about early life of Teddy Roosevelt, he was a sick, weakly individual. And before last night, that was the only information I knew about Teddy Roosevelt. And I still loved him because that information, it hit me so deeply. Because being born with less than a 1% chance of survival, having the heart condition that I had, I was told, stay away from all physicality, no weights, no combat sports, nothing like that. And I refused to accept that. And I wouldn't let that be my destiny. I wasn't going to let that be all that I was. I wasn't going to let that definition of me define me, for lack of better words. I was going to push past that assumption, and I did, and it worked out. And same thing goes for Teddy Roosevelt. He was not supposed to be a physical individual at all. And although he was never, and we'll get to some of this, he was never like one of the toughest, rootinest, tootinest cowboys or anything like that. The man pushed himself past what he was supposed to be capable of, and he became much more. So never limit yourself by what you've been told you must be. Nobody can tell you what you must be but you. So this lesson is, I am not a failure. I cannot fail. This was something he told himself, and I believe the context was on a hunt. They were hunting and did not see the game for a few days, and it was just getting worse conditions and worse conditions. And his friend who he was hunting with thought, okay, surely we're going to end this, right? We're going to go home. And no, Teddy Roosevelt was not going home. He said, I am not a failure. I cannot fail. But this mantra, this bulletproof mindset, this is something that I want to hold on to and keep as I come into my own as a man. I am not a failure. I cannot fail. Tell yourself that. When things get tough, tell yourself that. When you want to quit, when things look low, when you feel a moment of despair, when you feel the darkness kicking back up, and you want to let it go, say, I am not a failure. I cannot fail. It reminds me of Hemingway and the quote from Old Man and the Sea that man is not made for defeat. We need to remember that. Keep that in mind. And that's only something that's a power that only you can unlock. Okay. And what I mean by that is I'm always a big, huge believer in narrative therapy and the fact that the narratives that we tell ourselves about who we are, that becomes the life we reinforce and live out. So if you tell yourself, I am not a failure, I cannot fail, you won't. Things might not go your way, but you're never going to stop. So how can you fail? So this next lesson doesn't technically come from Teddy himself, but it comes from somebody who was working with Teddy. They wrote this letter and they said, this world is a beautiful place to live, but there's a lot of wild hogs let loose in it. It's a great lesson that goes along with the speak soft but carry a big stick mentality where, the world is a beautiful place and there's a lot of beautiful people, a lot of great individuals with good hearts. But as a younger man, as you and I are, it's easy to be naive, to be foolish. I've definitely made my share of mistakes. Dom and I in our coffee talk the other day talked about how, when we were younger, we fell down some YouTube rabbit holes and got influence from some people who were looking to take advantage of individuals like myself and Dom, who were insecure young high school kids. You know what I mean? Try to hope and believe for the best in every individual, but guard yourself knowing there are a lot of bad people out there ready to take advantage of naivety. So I thought that was a nice thing I wanted to add, even though I know technically it's not Teddy Roosevelt's words. This next one's also not technically Teddy's words, but it's about Teddy, and this lesson is 100% a Teddy Roosevelt lesson. There was this letter written by the individual who worked with Teddy Roosevelt, and he said, Theodore Roosevelt was the most extraordinary young man that I've ever met. And unless I'm completely mistaken and far off, the world is bound to hear from him one day. I mean, think about that. Think about who that guy was writing about. Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, our 26th president. The world did hear from him. He's made a splash. I'm in 2022 talking about this man. The lesson that hit me here that I want to share with all you guys and sort of propose the question is, how are you showing up in your day to day? When you interact with individuals, how are you showing up in a way that would leave them to think the world is bound to hear from that individual? Are you living an extraordinary life? Are you leaving that extraordinary impact on individuals? Because you absolutely can do that. You might think, I'm not Teddy Roosevelt, I'm not this or that. And Teddy Roosevelt was just a guy like you. And when you watch the documentary, you learn, he wasn't anything special, certainly not right out of the box, so to speak. What was special about him was mindset and belief and determination and grit and humility and honesty and integrity and authenticity. It's all of these things that you have access to, that I have access to. How can we show up in our day to day lives in a way that leaves people saying and thinking the world is bound to hear from that individual? Because I think the world is bound to hear from you. That's one of the root ideas here at Save for More is, it's not just a simple, actually, you are saved for more days. No, I believe each and every one of you out there is saved for some higher purpose that would leave a legacy in this world if you could find that best version of yourself, if you could find, the very peak of who you are. And I want that for you. So, how can we show up in a way that says this person is going to make a difference? This person, the world is bound to hear from. This next lesson kind of showcases an answer to the last lesson's question of how can we show up in a way that is extraordinary, that makes people think, the world is bound to hear from this individual one of these days. And it is that after after Teddy Roosevelt lost his first wife and mother in the same night, after this tragic event, as one of the documentarians sort of noted, Teddy Roosevelt went out to the Dakota area to toughen himself up, both mentally and physically. And this individual said something that's very telling, very important. And that is that Teddy Roosevelt relied on that mental and physical toughness for the rest of his life. He absolutely would not have been who he was uh, and who he became if it wasn't for that toughening, both mentally and physically. Teddy Roosevelt did this voluntarily after losing, like I said, his wife and his mother in the same night. That's like beyond tragic, right? This is a horrible thing that happened to him. And how many lesser men would have been completely shattered, crumbled, broken for the rest of their life, the rest of their days from such an event? But Teddy Roosevelt was able to mourn and reflect and then go off and understand that he could build his mind and body in such a way that he could come back stronger. That shows again another self-belief and self-reliance that the man had. That's super admirable. you know there's times where defeat looks us in the face and we shrink our heads, we look away, and we look down, and we give up. And Teddy did not. Theodore Roosevelt did not give up. He said, I will make myself stronger. I will make myself harder. I will become who I have to become. That's a lesson I want to take. That's something I want to strive to be. I want to push myself mentally and physically. We can't let words hurt us. In this generation, people are so very milk toast soft that, you say the wrong word, they're triggered, they're offended, and now their whole day's ruined. I don't want to be that person, man. I don't want my day to be ruined from someone saying something offensive to me. I don't care. I'm toughing. I'm going to be tougher mentally than that. And physically, we could be the guys from Wally, that movie where we're just rolling around on our little carts playing our VR headset games all day. We could, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think you should do that either. I think that we should push ourselves physically, work out. And like I said in Becoming More episode 4, you know, take control of and conquer your inner domain so that you can defeat the external. That's something that Teddy understood. From his life, he showcased that he understood if you want to get things done out there in that real world, if you want to accomplish your goals, you're going to need to take care of what's in here first. You don't take care of what's in here by coddling it, by being gentle with it and treating it like a baby. You treat yourself like a baby, you're going to live like a baby. You're not going to get very far by yourself. But if you want to be a self-reliant, self-determined individual who gets things done, then you're going to have to push yourself and you're going to have to treat yourself like somebody who can take it. All right, we have another quote from the man himself who said, "Never hit a man if you can help it, but if you must, put him to sleep." This again continues our conversation on being sheepdogs, being warrior poets, being defenders. You're never the one looking for a fight. It's people with big egos. It's boys. It's kids who need to puff their chest and get into fights over little things. Right. I think of the time I saw the most fights break out. It was at frat parties because those guys that they're untested boys who want so badly to prove that they're men. And when someone's so desperate to prove they're a man, that's what turns them into those menace individuals like bullies and looking for fights. If you're a good man, you're not looking for the fight. You're looking for any way to avoid the fight, diffuse the fight, and let the fight pass. But like Teddy Roosevelt said, man, if you can't help it and you must hit the individual because there's no other choice, because sometimes there is not, coward of the county, then you have to put them to sleep. You strike first, strike hard, and show no mercy. I say a little bit of that in jest, just fun Cobra Kai. But the moral of that story, the principle still remains that we aren't looking for fights. But you need to have that within you to be able to unleash that on someone, or else you're going to live in fear. You are, and you're going to be bullied. And it might not look the way bullying looked in high school. People won't be teasing you and picking on you about the shirt you're wearing or whatever. But you're going to be bullied in the workplace. You're going to be bullied by the contractor you hire. You're going to be bullied in these situations. You're going to be pushed around and taken advantage of if people can tell that you have no spine, no backbone, no big stick, no fist to put them down with. Being a good man, being the king, the owner of your domain, the man of the house, whatever you want to say, a part of that is defending your castle. And if you can't do that, well, it's bound to be overrun. This next lesson is one that really hits home for me. It's something that I could have used growing up. Um, so I'll start with explaining where the lesson comes from. And that is that Theodore Roosevelt came from New York. He was a blue blooded individual, not born a cowboy, but he chose to bring himself to the Dakota areas, the Montanas, the Wyomings, to get involved with nature, become a conservationist, and become a cowboy. He lived this cowboy lifestyle. And like the documentary mentioned, some lifestyles, they come with hazing. Cowboy lifestyle is one of them. They think, we're the rough and tough individuals who live this life. We're the ranchers. Blue bloods from New York come here to visit. They don't understand. They don't get it. So there's going to be a hazing situation that takes place, and they're not going to. You're going to have your respect be earned. Okay. And Teddy Roosevelt did earn that respect. He proved himself as a man amongst men, but he didn't do it through being the stereotypical boyish understanding of a true man, right? He wasn't the biggest, strongest guy with the most girls around who could drink the most, and he was the best shot or anything. He was for all intents and purposes, none of those things. None of those things externally, right? He was smaller individual with glasses who was a bad shot. He wasn't what a younger me would have considered a good man because I was so focused on that superficial layer. I was stuck in that alpha male mindset of you had to have the big muscles, you had to be able to fight, you had to do all of these, drink a certain amount of whiskey without wincing kind of idea of manhood. And if that's where you are caught up in right now, thinking, that's how you become a man, and your level of masculinity is based on these external factors, then you need to reevaluate that, because it's not what it's about. That is just a boyish understanding of it, right? When it comes down to it, what matters and what these individuals saw in Teddy Roosevelt that earned him the respect, that made him a good man, was his grit, his determination, his belief, his ability to never complain, to always get up and do the job. It was these internal factors. That's where the real man lies. It has nothing to do with how you look. It has nothing to do with how big your muscles are, how much money you have in the bank. It has nothing to do with any of these external factors. It's everything to do with your spirit, your virtue, your values, your integrity, your character. Great lesson from Theodore Roosevelt. Never pretended to be anything he wasn't. He just showed you who he was on the inside, and he was going to earn your respect through his character. I need you to pause right now, get a piece of paper, and write this one down. While the video is paused, how about you go ahead and subscribe as well? That's very helpful. But yeah, get a piece of paper and write this next lesson down. It's a good one. To paraphrase, Theodore Roosevelt said this roughly: that he would not be president if it wasn't for North Dakota. And as the documentary points out, what he meant by that is that he would not have had the ability to lead the country and be that great man if it wasn't for those experiences in self reliance that he learned in North Dakota. If he didn't put himself through hell and learn all that he had to learn through the difficulties of the Badlands, then he would have never been able to be president. If he didn't learn to lead himself and push himself through injuries and heartache and the hazing and the threats of violence and the duels, and if he didn't deal with all that he had to deal with and he shirked away from that and never led himself through it, he certainly would not have been able to lead the country. Same goes for us, man. If we're ever going to lead a family, if we're ever going to lead a business, if we're ever going to lead anything, we have to start by taking control and leading ourselves. If we are out of control ourselves, if our lives are out of control, we can't we can't have a snowball's chance in hell of leading anything else or getting anything else under control. So it starts with you taking back your own life. Take the helm, be the steersman, be the father to yourself. Okay, this next one's another good one. If you want to write it down too, not a bad idea. I think our generation could use this one, because John Wayne's era even was really good at this one, not being passive aggressive. So I mentioned a duel in the last lesson. Well, there was an individual who wanted to duel Teddy Roosevelt and wrote a letter proposing as much, and he was saying like, "I can't believe that you're my enemy, and I never thought that this would be the case," to Teddy. And Theodore Roosevelt responded by saying, "Hey, I'm not your enemy. And if I were, you would know it." And see, this is a lesson that I think needs to get relearned in our generation because of how long we've been walking on eggshells because of anything we say that could be perceived in the wrong way can set someone off. We have to watch what we say so much because everyone is so quick to be offended and upset at words. So something that I just want to keep in mind, the lesson that I'm going to take is you don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be a douche, but you can be assertive and speak your mind. If something isn't right, if you have a grievance, if you have something you want to say, just say it. Just say it, the truth. Just give the truth out there. And if you give the truth, what's the biggest trouble that can come? Because to me, I don't think the opposite of passive aggressive is aggressive. I don't think you have to be aggressive about things. You just have to be assertive, which comes from a confidence in the self to know that you are completely justified in speaking your mind and your thoughts. And it's okay. And if the individual wants to get offended, man, that's on them. This story is another example of why Teddy Roosevelt's one of the coolest guys who's ever lived. Um, one of his boats was stolen, and he was not going to let it go. He and his boys got together. They got another boat, and they tracked these boat thieves down the river, chased them down, caught up with them, took them by gunpoint, and it was a little boat. Could have cut his losses and just got on with it, but he didn't. And he said, the reason he didn't was lawlessness breeds more lawlessness, essentially. And you have to take a stand. If you let this go, well, then the line keeps getting pushed further and further and further. And that's why this theme of being a warrior poet and that song, Coward of the County, it keeps popping back up for me as I think about Teddy Roosevelt's life, because I think he understands that concept that Coward of the County talked about and the film Straw Dogs talks about. And it goes back to the passive aggressive thing. It goes back to standing up for yourself, having the big stick. All of this comes back together when you think about this. When he says lawlessness breeds lawlessness, you have to take a stand, or the line keeps getting pushed and pushed. Um, it's like the foot in the door technique in a very evil way. Let's think of Straw Dogs, for example. This is a film, and you can go out and watch it, and I won't try to spoil it too much, but essentially, it starts with this crew working on his house, and they're working earlier than he would like. He gets woken up by them working, and he comes out and he's trying to tell them, like, oh, we're still sleeping. And now, like I mentioned, you get bullied in different ways. He gets bullied by them, essentially saying, oh, around here, we start work around this time. So that's one step. And then they start ogling his wife, and it's another step, and it keeps going further and further. And you can watch the film. It's a great lesson on, if you don't hold the line, that line will keep getting pushed and pushed and pushed until you have your back against the wall and you realize how absolutely real and horrifying things just got. Now, I mentioned a phrase in one of these earlier lessons that he proved himself as a man amongst men. In the last two coffee talk videos I did, I mentioned how I've started to go to this men's Bible study. I'm going to continue to do this because there I'm surrounded by a lot of men, not just they have, the biological makings of being a man, but they are true men in spirit and in definition of character. These are men who are disciplined mentally and physically, that I can look up to and learn from. And it's here amongst them that I can sort of gauge myself, not in a comparison sense, but prove myself as a man amongst men. Can I fit as a part of this culture? Can I be a member of this tribe? Right? Think back to evolutionary psychology. We had tribes and we needed to be useful to that tribe to be a part of it, right? We had to earn our keep in a way. And earning our keep looks different these days, but I want to be a part of a community like this where I used to get this out of the boxing gym type situation, but with my blood thinners, I'm told to stay away from the boxing gym. And so I'm trying to get it here now. I'm trying this opportunity, where I want to meet more good men that I can look up to and be able to gauge myself with them and prove myself amongst them. And so I'm looking forward to that and to see how that evolves. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but what Teddy Roosevelt did with the Rough Riders, and before that, working in North Dakota amongst the ranchers and being a cowboy, he did. He pushed himself and he lived with men, and he kept up with these men and proved who he was to himself and to everyone around him. And that's what I would like to do. I would like to do that same thing and step up and show who I am to these individuals. For this lesson, some of you may think, I'm stretching. I'm sort of taking something that's not there. But philosophically, I do think it's there, and I think it's valid. Teddy Roosevelt was one of the greatest conservationists in history ever. I mean, so much of this American land that we see and admire, the state parks and all the beautiful mountain ranges of Wyoming, Montana, these are conserved and they're still there, and no one's been able to develop over them because of Teddy Roosevelt. And to me, a lesson that I've taken there is that we have to be able to conserve the values we believe in. We have to keep the old ways alive, keep virtue alive, keep character alive, even when it's not popular. Because it wasn't popular back then for Teddy Roosevelt to say, we are not touching any of this land, right? A lot of developers, even he was a Republican, and people on his side said, and this doesn't make sense. We need this. We're going to do great things here. You're stopping progress. You're ruining our businesses. This is a bad decision. Get out of our way, essentially. And he didn't do it. He knew that no one else was coming to fight for this thing. And you have to understand and take that mentality on too. The things you believe in and care about and value, if you don't speak up and defend them and conserve them, who is? You can't rely on everyone else. If it creates this bystander effect, and no one's going to step up, man. You have to step up. If you believe in something, if you have a cause, you have to speak up. You have to conserve it. You have to fight for it, because no one else is going to do that. That's the lesson. It might not be popular. Even people on your side might turn on you, but you have to know what you believe, and you have to stand up for what you believe. Teddy Roosevelt, according to this narrative in this documentary and according to the writings of the man himself, was really built and forged and came of age in North Dakota. But as one of the documentarians point out, he was only there for like less than a year at the most. It wasn't really that much of an experience, but to him, it was everything. And this is another lesson to, to highlight the fact that our lives are driven by our narratives up here. It's not so much about the events that happen, it's about the meanings we put on those events. This is something that the Stoics talked about. This is something that rational emotive behavioral therapists talk about. It's really not the events or the things people say, it's the meanings we attach to them, it's the beliefs we have about them. And you control that, man. You control the square footage in your head. So events that happen, like the loss of Teddy Roosevelt's wife and mother on the same day, it's it's the it's the narrative that he attached to it, um, what he believed about it that pushed him forward. If he chose to say, this is the moment of my defeat and my life is filled with absolute sorrow and I am meant to be broken by the world, and can you believe the tragedy, and he just did a woe is me type story and he spun that yarn, where does that lead? It leads to him being a very resentful, sad individual you'd meet at a bar, not an individual you'd see his face on Mount Rushmore. What put his face on Mount Rushmore was this narrative that he crafted in his own mind, this meaning that he built up for himself of who he was going to be. In the real practical world, the tactile world can say, you weren't really a cowboy in North Dakota all that long. And none of that mattered. To him, this was his battleground. This was his testing ground to become who he needed to be. This physically initiated him into manhood. And if you know anything about going from boy to man, it's all about initiation. He initiated himself and he put that meaning on this. It's the narratives that we choose. It's the meanings we choose to attach to certain events. That is what matters. So choose a strong narrative that will put you on Mount Rushmore, not in a bar somewhere. Theodore Roosevelt, as a leader, knew that you did not elect me to be your president so that I could do what you wanted me to do what feels good for you. You elected me so that I could do what I thought was right. As the documentary says, Americans respect that, and I respect that. I love that concept of, I'm not here to be the people pleaser. I know that some of the things I say are going to rub people the wrong way. I've gotten dislikes and I've gotten the comments about what I've said being like very insensitive and this and that. I get it. And I'm sure, as an older man, I'm going to look back and say, I could have said that better. I could have done this better. I came off a little wrong here. But I'm not here to coddle you. You don't need to be coddled. You're a strong individual. I'm just saying words. If you don't like them, you can turn this video off. Um, and that's what I admire about Teddy Roosevelt, man. He also wasn't just trying to appease you. I don't want to appease you. I want to see you become your best version. And I know that when I was being coddled in any instance in my life, I only grew softer. Okay, guys, that's all I have. Thank you very much. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and share this one with somebody if you could. If you would, I'd really appreciate you sharing this video out there. Thank you, guys, and I will see you in the next one.
I know you don't wanna sneak through my window. I don't wanna rush it. Take this shit slow. I don't know how we'll be when it gets low.